Welcome to Metrics That Matter. We are diving into, I think, some really, really valuable insights that we've gotten from Adeeb, and these are all focused on how we as engineering teams can better articulate or better explain the value and impact of our work to the business.
Yeah, I mean, if you've ever felt like the work that your engineering teams do is a bit of a black box to the rest of the company or even to your leadership,
Hmm.
or you're just looking for ways to kind of showcase the strategic importance of your technical teams, um, then this is the deep dive for you.
Absolutely. And what I think is so cool about this is that we're going to kind of go through key concepts on how to translate the everyday work of engineering into a language that resonates with CEOs, CFOs, CMOs, all these executive leaders, right? So think of this as like your guide to making sure that your engineering efforts get the recognition and the investment that they deserve. Okay. So let's just jump right into it. First thing, I think it's important to establish the challenge. Why is this a challenge? Why is this a problem? What is the fundamental challenge when it comes to communicating the value of engineering?
Yeah. I think one way to think about it is, engineering oftentimes operates as kind of a black box, right? So
Yeah.
it's this idea that people outside of engineering may not easily grasp the processes involved in getting from an idea to a working product or feature.
Right.
They see a request go in, eventually a feature gets released, but all the steps in between are really opaque.
Totally. It's just like magic, right? It just shows up one day and it's like, how did this happen? So,
Yeah.
yeah, okay.
Yeah.
And so the problem with that is that lack of clarity can make it hard for engineering leaders to really influence or even align with the overall business strategy.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think, what's fascinating to me about all of this is, it's not just about better reporting. Like, it's not just about writing up, nice little reports for executives. This is really about engineers having a seat at the table, a strategic voice. Like if executives don't understand how engineering work directly contributes to achieving business goals, well, it's tough for engineering to be seen as a true partner, as opposed to just kind of a service organization.
Right. Absolutely.
Okay, so where do we even begin to bridge this gap?
Yeah, I think it starts with understanding what's top of mind for these different executives, right? Their priorities are going to be different, and tailoring your communication to what they care about most is, I think, really key. So maybe let's start with the CEO.
Okay.
What's usually their primary focus?
Oh, man. I mean, I think they're usually, most focused on growing revenue, making sure we're ahead of the competition, and just driving innovation, right? Those seem to be the big three for CEOs.
Absolutely. So when you're communicating with the CEO, you need to frame your engineering efforts in those terms.
Right.
For example, instead of just saying, we improved performance by 10%, you could frame it as, this 10% performance boost translates to a projected X dollar increase in annual recurring revenue directly supporting your growth targets.
Ooh, I love that.
Right. And then think about, okay, well, how does our work accelerate the time to market for new products?
Yeah.
Or ensure the scalability needed to handle rapid growth, or foster the kind of innovation that gives the company a competitive edge? So you really want to tailor your language to those high-level strategic goals.
Yeah, hit them right where they live. What do they care about the most, and make sure that the engineering message is kind of framed within those outcomes that they actually care about.
Absolutely.
Okay, cool. So we got the CEO. What about, let's say, a CFO? I feel like their focus would probably be a little bit different, right?
Yeah, absolutely. The CFO is typically going to be focused on things like cost efficiency, budget predictability, return on investment, the classic ROI.
Yeah. Yep.
So for them, you'd want to highlight, how is engineering capacity being managed? What are the costs associated with our technical debt? And what efficiency improvements has the team implemented? So really, are we optimizing spending?
Gotcha. So it's all about the, financial implications when we're talking to a CFO.
Yeah, absolutely.
Cool. Okay. So let's say we've got the CRO, the Chief Revenue Officer.
Yeah.
So the CRO is going to be all about, sales velocity, customer retention, how do we expand revenue streams? So really, anything that affects the top line.
Makes sense.
So, think about feature delivery timelines. Are we getting critical features into the hands of the sales team?
Yeah.
how system reliability, downtime is going to directly impact sales and customer satisfaction.
Yeah.
And then, are we addressing customer impacting defects promptly?
So again, it's about how engineering directly affects the top line.
Okay, cool. So we've hit CEO, CFO, CRO. Now, let's move on to CPO, the Chief Product Officer.
Yeah. So the CPO is going to be very invested in the product roadmap, the user experience, and feature adoption. So for them, really, it's all about agility and the ability to kind of deliver on that product vision. So things like lead time for change,
Yep.
how quickly can engineering respond to new requirements or market shifts,
Gotcha.
deployment frequency,
Mm-hmm.
how often are new features and improvements being released,
Yeah.
and then also how much engineering capacity is available for innovation work.
Right. So it's really about speed, reliability, and just the capacity to build the right things.
Yeah.
Cool. Okay, so last one, CMO.
All right, so the CMO, they're often focused on digital transformation initiatives,
Mm-hmm.
making sure marketing campaigns are executed effectively,
Right.
and ensuring that the website and applications are performing flawlessly.
Of course, yeah.
So for them, the crucial engineering metrics relate to things like site reliability.
Yeah.
Is the website up and running smoothly?
Right.
What's the system uptime? Is the infrastructure scalable to handle traffic spikes from, a new campaign?
Yeah.
And how predictable are our releases? Can marketing plan their activities accordingly?
Gotcha. So, okay, I think that's, I think we've done a really good job of outlining, different personas and what they care about and the types of things that you as an engineering leader or an engineer, could focus on when you're communicating to them. But we've talked a lot about who we're talking to, but the real impact comes when we connect our actions to their outcomes in a language that they understand.
Yeah,
Right. So it's clear we need to speak their language, and now we need to move beyond just reporting numbers, right?
absolutely. This brings us to, what some people call vanity metrics.
Okay.
Right. So I think a lot of engineering teams tend to focus on metrics that are primarily interesting within the engineering department itself.
Yeah. Things like, number of story points completed, number of code commits, how often deployments happen. Yeah, all the internal stuff that honestly no one else cares about.
Right. And while these can be useful for, internal team management, they often don't resonate with executives.
Huh. You can almost see like a CFO's eyes glazing over when you start talking about story points.
Right. Exactly. So the key here is to really shift your focus to what we call business-focused metrics.
Mhm. Okay.
These are the metrics that directly demonstrate how engineering efforts are contributing to those executive priorities that we just outlined.
Makes sense.
They effectively bridge the gap between the technical work and the overarching business goals.
Okay. So I love that. I think that's a great segue into, let's actually get into some of the meat here. Let's talk about some of these metrics that Adeeb highlighted in, their work. So the first one here is on-time delivery, which is also called engineering predictability. So help me understand, why is that so important to the executive team? Like, why should they care about that?
Well, I think it's all about predictability, right?
Oh.
Predictability builds trust and confidence.
Mm-hmm.
When engineering consistently delivers on its commitments, executives can rely on those timelines to align other critical business functions,
Right.
like sales, marketing, customer support.
Right.
If a new feature is promised by a certain date, sales can start their training, marketing can plan their campaigns, and customer expectations can be managed accordingly.
Right. Yeah, totally. Like, it just makes the whole machine work a lot more smoothly.
Yeah.
Okay. So, how can engineering teams actually communicate this effectively to executives? Like, just saying, like, we delivered on time is probably not enough.
No, you need to provide context and illustrate improvement, right?
Yeah.
So, for example, you could say something like, over the past quarter, engineering has improved our on-time delivery rate from 67% to 85%. This reduction in last-minute delays has significantly improved cross-team alignment and allowed us to launch our new marketing campaign as planned.
I love that. It's like a before and after. It shows progress. It shows that you're actually like moving the needle on something, and then it clearly links it to a business outcome.
Exactly.
I love that. Okay, so let's move on to the next one. Engineering capacity and the balance between innovation and maintenance.
Yeah.
Why should executives care about this?
Well, Because it provides them with a clear understanding of where engineering resources are being allocated.
Okay.
Right. Business leaders need to know, okay, how much effort is dedicated to building new features, the things that drive growth and innovation, versus how much is being spent on just maintaining existing systems and fixing bugs.
Gotcha. Yeah.
One helpful way to communicate this is to categorize engineering work
Yeah.
into buckets like, keep the lights on
Yeah.
or KTLO.
Okay. Yeah.
Right? That's like the work required to maintain existing systems, fix bugs, build new stuff that's feature development and innovation,
Yeah.
and then improve existing stuff, things like enhancements and reducing technical debt.
Gotcha.
And then you can share a breakdown, for instance. Currently, 54% of our engineering work is focused on new feature development, while 32% is allocated to KTLO activities and 14% towards reducing technical debt.
Yeah.
Something like that demonstrates a healthy balance between driving innovation and ensuring the stability of the platform.
Right. And I think that clarity on resource allocation is incredibly valuable for, leaders to be able to make strategic decisions.
Absolutely.
Okay, so the next one, lead time for change and deployment frequency.
Yeah.
I feel like these two are very closely related, and they speak to agility and just how quickly you can, respond to change, right?
Yeah,
Okay.
exactly. Lead time for change measures how quickly engineering can take an idea from its initial conception to being deployed and available to users.
Okay.
And then deployment frequency indicates how often the team releases new software.
Gotcha.
So, both of these are crucial because, faster delivery translates to quicker customer adoption, faster feedback loops, and ultimately faster revenue growth.
Right. Makes sense.
Right. And it also highlights, the organization's ability to rapidly adapt to market shifts and evolving customer needs.
Yeah.
So again, you need to define what these metrics mean specifically within your organization and then demonstrate the progress that you're making. For example, you could say, we've successfully reduced our lead time for change from 14 days to just 9 days. This improvement means we can now respond to market demands and implement critical updates much faster.
And I think the direct connection to responsiveness and gaining a competitive edge will definitely resonate with, leaders in the business.
Absolutely.
Okay, so last metric, ramp time for engineers.
Mhm.
Now, this might initially seem like a very internal engineering concern. So explain to me why it is important for executives to actually be aware of this.
Yeah, because, the efficiency of your onboarding process directly impacts how quickly new hires can become productive contributors to the team.
Of course. Yeah.
And when you're scaling your engineering organization, getting new engineers up to speed swiftly is absolutely critical for maintaining that velocity and hitting those goals.
Yeah.
A longer ramp-up period represents a significant cost in terms of lost productivity and delayed output. So, track how long it takes for new engineers to become fully productive. Look at their coding activity, their code review contributions, their project involvement, and then share those results.
Yeah.
Something like, we've implemented a new onboarding program that has successfully reduced the average ramp-up time for new engineers from 8 weeks down to just 6 weeks. This means our new hires are contributing meaningful to projects much sooner.
Love that.
Right, and that directly translates to, faster team growth and increased output.
Right, which at the end of the day is really what they care about. It's like, how quickly can we get these, new hires contributing and bringing value to the organization?
Yeah, absolutely.
Okay, so those are some incredibly insightful metrics, and I love the way that you explained how to actually communicate them, right? Like, how do you take this number and then make it meaningful to someone outside of engineering? I think, one thing that Adeeb also kind of touched on was this idea of the role of tools. So, it's not just about manually tracking all these metrics in spreadsheets, right?
No, absolutely not. I mean, there's a whole ecosystem of, modern software engineering intelligence platforms out there
Yeah.
that are really designed to automate the collection, the tracking, the visualization of these very metrics.
Mm.
So it's much easier for engineering leaders to get a clear and objective understanding of their team's performance and generate those executive-friendly reports that we've been talking about.
Yeah. I mean, that's a huge point. It's like you have to have the data available in a reliable way to be able to effectively communicate and build trust with the executive team. So, okay, let's just kind of wrap this up. We've talked a lot about metrics. We've talked about personas. We've really gone deep on, how to communicate the value of engineering to the rest of the business. Are there any sort of overall best practices for communicating these business-focused metrics to executives?
Yeah, I think there are a few key strategies that stand out. So first, you want to establish regular and predictable reporting cadences.
Okay.
Maybe weekly updates for more tactical information and more comprehensive quarterly reports for just strategic overview. That consistency in reporting helps build understanding and trust.
Gotcha. Yeah.
And then second, and this is, I think, absolutely crucial, you need to master the art of data storytelling. Right. Don't just present raw numbers and charts. Craft compelling narratives that explain what happened, why it's significant in the context of those business goals, and what potential actions might be necessary as a result.
Oh, man. Storytelling, data storytelling. That's a whole other deep dive that we could go into.
Yeah,
But
exactly.
I love that. Okay, so establish cadences, master data storytelling, and then anything else.
Yeah, the last one is, always practice transparency when it comes to risks and challenges.
Hmm.
If your data reveals potential bottlenecks or difficulties,
Yeah.
proactively bring these to the attention of executives,
Yeah.
right, and propose solutions.
Yeah.
This demonstrates foresight, a commitment to addressing issues before they escalate, and it builds confidence in your
Yeah.
leadership.
Yeah. It shows that you're being proactive. You're not just hiding problems. You're actually like facing them head on. So, okay, so we've covered, the challenge of communication. We've covered the different, stakeholders and their priorities. We've talked about the metrics that we should be focused on, and really how to present them in a compelling way. Um, you know, I think the big takeaway here for me is, understanding the priorities of your executive peers and translating the world of engineering into clear business outcomes isn't just about producing better reports. It's really about having a more strategic and influential voice within your organization.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, by strategically focusing on those key metrics that we talked about, on-time delivery predictability, allocation of engineering capacity, lead time for change, engineer ramp-up time, and by communicating those clearly in the context of business goals, you can truly elevate the role and impact of engineering.
Absolutely. So we hope that this deep dive, drawing on Adeeb's valuable insights, has given you some good frameworks for thinking about how you communicate the work of your engineering teams. And I think, the question that I would leave the listeners with is, what key metrics resonate most with your leadership?
Right.
What stories can you start telling with your engineering data? I think those are the questions to kind of carry forward as you move into the next week, the next month, and start thinking about how you're going to elevate the way that you communicate the work of your team.
Absolutely.
So thank you so much for joining us on this insightful deep dive into metrics that matter.
Yeah. Thanks for having me.